Thanks for joining today on Practical 365. Today's going to be a fun topic to talk about. We've focused so much on content on various different topics, particularly talking about security and compliance and a lot of topics on this. We talked about MFA considerably on several of the podcasts and content. Today, we're going to go into a real world example of when things go wrong. And it's kind of a little reminder on why it's so important for us to be very vigilant in our space as systems administrators to protect our environments. And Chris has been so kind to join us to talk to us about this example of fraud that he's run into in his personal life here. Chris is a colleague that I've worked with for quite some time. He's a product marketing manager at Quest Software. He has a little gold star because he did not fall victim. And we really appreciate him sharing this because it really is an interesting example of a multi-level scam and how unfortunately common it is and how easy it is to fall victim. And then we have Brian Payton here. Brian is a principal strategic systems consultant at Quest Software. And we're really excited, Brian, to have you here to help keep us honest and help give us additional insight into what happened. Brian, can you kick off just an MFA review? Because sometimes there's a little bit of confusion in this space.
Yeah, so MFA is multi-factors authentication. First things first, there's the thing. Typically, there's even an acronym in the security community, the IAAA, identification, authentication, authorization, accountability. So the key thing here, the first thing is identify. We all have a username, and then we all have a password typically associated with it as well. So that is all stuff that you know. Then there is something that you have. So going back in the days, there was always the hard tokens. You may see that type of stuff out there. I use a YubiKey, and more modern now, everybody has a phone, so people use authentication apps. You can see Microsoft Authenticator, Google Authenticator. There's many out there to be able to choose from, but that is something that you have. Then there is the biometric portion of it, which is something that you are. Maybe it's something with my eye or my fingerprint, something of that nature. Those are all the different things that are multi-factor authentication, meaning more than one of those different things. And it's kind of interesting, looking at a different slide here, we are always continuously hearing about zero trust, and there's the location-based control is now coming into play as well. There's the conditional access policies that are part of it. Just being the fact that you can't trust anything that is outside the perimeter of the different network. And zero trust is going like, hey, I don't trust anything whatsoever inside the perimeter or outside because we're living in a scary world right now.
And Brian, when we say critical accounts, I think bank accounts, I think your network login for your employer. What are other critical accounts that people should really ensure is protected by MFA?
I feel any account that has control over other accounts should absolutely have MFA enabled. However, the attack surface is kind of spread out even more. So I'm actually feeling that most consumers should even have some kind of MFA set up as well. It's not just for administrators anymore. The convenience has gone way up. You probably notice on your local banking applications that you'll have multi-factor come in. You have to do some kind of PIN code or SMS verification. It has become much more common in today's society, and it's become more common because of necessity. It needs to be a little bit more challenging than it used to be.
And you kind of mentioned banking, password issues, that kind of drives into this. People I don't think understand how people get these passwords so easily and some of the issues and help this prevent. What are the common password issues we want to review today?
Well, I like going back to there's a RockU breach that happened in 2009. This was a huge database that was breached with all these different passwords that were in clear text. The fact of the matter is we are all human on this line, and humans typically do very similar stuff, right? So this really kind of changed the game because no longer did I have to guess your password. Going back 30 years ago, everybody used the common term password for their password. Now I had a list of the most common variations that people were using. And if I breach one site, I can get that password list. More than likely, most human beings reuse passwords across multiple sites. So it was the LinkedIn breach back many years ago. There's been multitude of different breaches, and being the fact that we are all human, well, if I know this password, let me try it over here and see if that works. So people are really exposed right now. People follow similar patterns. It's really interesting. I live in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. You can imagine how many people in this area are huge Cowboys fans, right? So they'll do Cowboys players as passwords. So it's really easy to start guessing those different patterns and incrementing it a little bit. And that kind of even goes to the social media stuff. So password reset questions. Hey, what was your high school mascot? What's your mother's maiden name? How many people here have a Facebook account? I no longer do, but people give away this information voluntarily. So just a little bit of a due diligence, and you're able to extract out all the information you really need to affect somebody.
Excellent. And as we continue this storing and background, we also want to review domain spoofing. And domain spoofing is the process of using a fake domain to mimic another domain. So the common example that we see here is I've used, if yourbank.com is the name of your bank, someone goes out and registers yoursbank.com as a fake site. And the goal of that is to use that bad site to commit fraud of some sort or another. It can be to send email, it can be to put up a fake account page, log in to try to get login details, and things like that. These are really difficult for administrators to deal with, particularly from an email standpoint, because a lot of times they're properly signed. You can get a certificate for those domains. It'll pass email checks because there's no reason for it not to. It's a legitimate domain name. It's registered. It has an SSL cert. It can be in a GC tenant, an Office 365 tenant, wherever it needs to be. It's proper. So a lot of this mail will not necessarily end up in spam filters and things like that. So it is really important for people to be very, very careful and aware as we talk about some of the additional topics here. The other thing I just want to add some storytelling. I'm a U.S. expat living in the U.K. Chris's story, he shares a story as someone who lives in the U.K. as well. Bank transfers are very normal in EMEA, the UK, and other regions of the world. And so for our US listeners, bank transfers are not super common, but here I've paid friends for my part of dinner with a bank transfer before. So, a lot of times in the US, a bank transfer is really reserved for a very rare event, only buying a house, only doing a very certain event. In the US, outside of the US, it's quite common. So just keep that in mind as we do this. That said, this scam and this issue is popping into U.S. real estate transactions just as it is over here. So I just wanted to add that level of context as we go in. So Chris, with the gold star and not falling victim, thanks for being here to share the story. Why don't we hop into it and hear your experience?
Yeah, thank you, Mike. So I'm currently in the process of moving house, selling our current property and buying a new house. It's been a really long, drawn-out process. It's been almost 6 months from when we made our offer. We've had, the whole process has been areas of miscommunication or just zero communication, and it's been very frustrating. But we're getting towards the end, and light is at the end of the tunnel, and we're very close to actually completing on everything. So on the Thursday evening, a couple of weeks back, we received an email from our solicitor asking us to confirm our funds were ready to transfer, and we replied saying yes, we've got the money. We asked, can you just confirm the exact amount we need to send, because we weren't sure on the precise amount that it was going to come to. And then on the Friday morning, we received a reply telling us exactly how many tens of thousands of pounds we needed to transfer, and then we had the bank details were supplied. And we were initially very excited about this because we're thinking this has been a huge deal for us, and then it's been quite agonizing at times, with the miscommunication. But we're getting right towards the end, and we were happy. We were ready to press the button and send the money. But I spotted there was an inconsistency in the bank details. Let's say that the bank details didn't match what we had previously been given for the solicitor when we had to pay like our initial legal fees. So that was the first like warning sign. And then I spotted that the email had come from a .uk address rather than a .co.uk. So although the entire email thread was there from the conversations we'd been having that week with the legal team, this was sent from a .uk address. So, you know, at that moment, the alarm bells were really ringing, and it was quite clear that something dodgy has happened here. Somebody has infiltrated the law firm's IT system, and they've got all of our information, all of our details. The initial email we received the Thursday night, like we didn't really think, we had no reason to be concerned because the tone of voice was copied, the email signature, it all looked legit. It was just those two details, the inconsistency in the bank details, and then spotting that very close but different email address. That's when I had to like phone up and ask them what's going on, and raised the alarm.
It was quite amazing when you showed me that thread on screen share, and it was very interesting and terrifying. And again, that you caught it is amazing, where it had the entire email thread of your conversation with the solicitor in it. So when we hop into what happened, it is an open investigation, in with the federal police here in the UK that are actively investigating it. But it's fair. We're fairly certain it's been pretty clear. It's a combination of two things that happened here. The first is, as Chris said, the firm had a exposure, likely through not having MFA of any kind on the person's Office 365 account, the paralegal that the person Chris was dealing with, and domain spoofing kind of tied together. So this person, the fraudulent activity, the person was able to download the outgoing email of this person and mimic it in this new formed spoof domain that they created with another email service. The download, it's called a BC. It's referred to as business email compromise. And as Chris said, what's so very difficult in this combination is they were able to mimic the person's behavior, the welcome, the hi, how are you, the thank you at the end. We have our little habits that we use, as Brian said at the beginning, our habits, really able to mimic that voice. Because the attacker used a similar named domain name and had the email thread, it really made it look convincing that it was coming from the firm. And I think, and Brian, you may have a different opinion, I think a lot would really struggle to catch this because of the combination of where it looks like the email, especially if you're on a mobile device. I don't know, Brian, if you have another opinion, but I think a lot of people would fall victim to this.
We're human. You're dealing with that. What I heard from Chris as well, you're getting excited about getting a house. There's already stress. You're in an emotional state already, which is easy to fall victim to. Most people don't think that somebody's out there just to get them. So your mindset's just a different thing where you see that capital O versus a zero in the web space. And if you're busy throughout your day, as we all are typically, your most likely thing to do is just click accept and move on, right? So, unfortunately, I can't really blame a consumer. It's just we are human.
And so as we talk about, what do we do as systems administrators? So we've got some tips around, this from different perspectives. If you are in an environment that doesn't have a form of MFA on your accounts, it's examples like this of exposure that really should drive you to force change in your environment. It's no longer an optional item. I know many of you watching this are aware of this and have implemented it. for those that have cyber insurance, which most firms do these days, it'll be a mandated item for it. So if you have cyber insurance and it's not on, you're likely not having full coverage because you're violating the terms of your policy. But it's also important to ensure that you're complete. You don't have exceptions. For years back, you'd hear of executives that didn't want MFA on because it's a pain in the neck. But that's even worse because those are the people that are named on the website that you can easily get their email address and are targets and have influence. So ensure that it is on and complete in your organization to help prevent not necessarily the domain spoofing problem, but the email and data getting into the wrong hands. Get training and set your procedures on fraud and scams and practice them. This should be part of your business continuity planning. This should be part of all of your planning to know how you'd react and protect, particularly if you have consumers working with your business, that you have plans in place. Keep yourself up to date and educated on what's going on, doing things like this and being able to give examples. And as an IT representative, attend staff meetings, attend them regularly, and share interesting stories. Don't just do the same training over and over again, right? Or give bad example. There's a bad example, boring examples. Share humanizing stories like this so that people really understand the impact and educate to protect them themselves. That's really important to protecting your environment. We will include in the article that accompanies this some of these resources. This includes some articles out on Practical 365 where we've covered MFA before. There's also a link to both FBI in the United States and the UK government advice on fraud and otherwise. And Tony Redmond, who's one of the main contributors for Practical 365, shares some other tips and some accompanying articles. So Brian, if you're a systems administrator and you notice domain spoofing, which is so very hard because it is an external thing, it's not you as an administrator that can actually prevent it. What do we do? What's one of our first things that we should do to help at least stop mail when we see something like this?
Well, there's other people you have to reach out to because you as an administrator don't control the entire internet. So you can go out to who.is, try to look up that whoever owns that different domain space, and go through that process first. And then if you get nowhere, well, then you can go to ICANN and report it there and, cross your fingers. They do something about it quickly, right? Because you're dealing with many other different people that have control over, the other things on the internet.
Excellent. And then what's important too is if it is a true incident that your cybersecurity firm's involved in, they're likely going to guide you here. As well. Hopefully, they should be helping you with this.
Absolutely.
And what are tips for companies as a whole? So, Brian, we talked about administrators, but there's also probably some really good best practices that all of us in companies should be following, particularly if we have consumers that are talking about money transfers and things like that.
I feel it's time that people actually start talking about this stuff. Not just because you're forced to do your annual security training, you do all that little column fodder, do the bare minimum, but why not even have like team calls where you're discussing different frauds that you've heard about on the news, whatnot. Get down to that human level. Talk about it frequently. Hey, here's the different scams that we saw out here in the news, whatever. I mean, regularly communicate what is going on, what we are seeing, so people will then put their little their guard up a little bit more. Unfortunately, most humans are very trusting. We almost have to kind of reverse that a little bit where you have to think like, hey, is this really legit or not? And slow down a little bit, right? We got to communicate so like Chris can see that different domain name obfuscation that's out there and realize that something bad is in fact happening. I also recommend, having IT people that are dealing with this, that have gone through a process and know what would happen prior to it ever occurring as well. That way, if it does happen to you, you know what to do next. You know who to communicate with outside of your organization if needed as well. So going back to the money transfer stuff, we have seen like emails like, hey, beware of this, whatever. But let's move on just from the emails and reach out to your other leadership and have them go down and communicate different examples maybe of what has happened in your organization so people realize this different type of stuff can in fact happen to you.
Excellent. And Chris, as one of our represented consumers today, what advice do you have from the journey and unfortunately running into this yourself?
I guess a good thing that I've learned from this is lots of people are wary of unsolicited emails. I quite often get asked for, I need to update my PayPal details or something, and then you look into it and you see the email address is gibberish and the logo might be pixelated or something. I think people are kind of generally well trained in spotting those types of phishing attempts, but when it's a transaction like such as buying a house, just be wary that even if it's an email that you're expecting, just double check that before you send any money anywhere, you need to be absolutely sure that the bank that you're sending it to matches what you've previously been told, what you've been expecting, and you need to ultimately just be sure that that everything matches up, and particularly like the domain, that was, we didn't spot that initially, and we may well not have spotted that at all. I guess also watching out for things like when there's such urgency, if people are wanting to encourage you to make your payment right there, right then, when it's a pressurized situation, then it's a huge red flag. And Mike, you were telling me earlier about an example from the US, which has been happening around spring break time.
Yeah, there's occasionally around spring break time, fraudsters will contact college kids like grandparents and say they've been held hostage and need money, but don't tell your son or daughter because it's a secret, and and stealing $10,000-20,000 dollars from grandparents. That's another urgency. Don't tell anyone.
Yeah, my grandparents have had that happen to them as well.
Yep. And, again, as Brian said, through Facebook research and everything else, going on spring break and now that data can be used, unfortunately, against you.
Yeah, be careful.
Excellent. So Brian, this is a sad slide that we put on because unfortunately it's the reality. But what should people do if they do fall victim? I know there's not a lot in a lot of these because it's so instant.
Well, share your story. The more it's out there, the better off we are all going to be because we can learn from each other. But the first thing first, share with your bank. Let them know. Let's see what they can, in fact, do, if there's anything they can do while it is in transit once you realize something bad has happened. Contact your company's federal police branch as well. Like I live in Texas, you also, depending on what it is, may need to contact your local authorities and fill out a police report. And that way your bank can actually see that it's been documented that you were falling victim, and maybe there's some kind of things they can do for you as well. So, communicate. The more we communicate, I think the better off we're all going to be.
Great advice. So thanks for everyone joining us today. A little bit different content. Hopefully, if you like it, comment below and let us know if you want to hear more content like this. Brian, thanks for joining us to share your insight on this really important space. And Chris, thank you again for sharing your story. And for those of you out there, if you have anyone buying or selling a house, send them this video, and it's probably worth them reviewing, or realtors or solicitors, and send them the article that accompanies it. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye.